It's been a journey. I think go into it eyes wide open. Building a venture fund is like doing anything else or building any other business. You have to go 0 to 1, and I think you have to be prepared all the way around to go 0 to 1. It's not easy by any means, no matter what you're doing, whether you're starting a small business, looking to raise a pre-seed round or a friends and family round for a high growth venture backed startup, or getting off the ground as a solo GP. And so getting mentally prepared for that, getting your family prepared for that, getting,
Preach on the family end.
Exactly. I mean, you may call it a solo GP, but as you know, it's anything but solo. Like,
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Alone Together, the podcast that explores the life of solo GPs and the weird little community that we've built in our part of the venture ecosystem. I'm Mike Ma, your host. I am a solo GP and I run Sidecut Ventures sometimes. And today it's a great honor to be host to my good friend, Nick Tippmann, a general partner at TipTop Ventures. And I'm so excited our conversation today because Nick, we've been friends for a bit since Camp Hustle and just hustling in a totally different context. And so thanks so much for being on the show.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm super pumped to be here and excited for a good conversation.
So cool. I mean, we could just dive in because we've known each other for a bit. I've been we've come close to doing a deal a couple times now. I think in 25, we're going to do it some point in time. I just don't know when. However, look, the goal of this, you have such a fascinating story. And when I think about Vertical SaaS, I think about Nick Tippmann, I think about our conversations. You've gotten me so hip to this part of investing, but I'm really curious because a lot of that's born by your experiences. So would you want to start there? Can you just talk about how you came into being an investor from those early experiences to where you are today, from investor to operator to investor, which is it's different. It's different than my path. I just think I'd love to hear your story, and I think our listeners would as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here and then to be able to share. One thought, not investor to operator to investor, but operator to investor. So just the clarification on that. The reason I share, I grew up very entrepreneurial in an entrepreneurial family, always wanting to start businesses, doing odd jobs, jumping in ponds, selling golf balls on the side of the road, lawn care businesses, things like that. Was hustling, had a decently successful eBay business back in high school where I had a little arbitrage between liquidation.com and eBay and exploited that and turned my parents' garage into a fulfillment center and refurbishment and fulfillment center back in high school. Always said I went to college, though, to learn how to start a real business. Went to Indiana University, studied entrepreneurship and marketing, and really fell into this whole startup world or came to it my senior year at college back in 2011, 2012, and was like, holy shit, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. This is the community. This is the model. This is how you and some buddies can have an idea, go build a product. You go talk to these people called angel investors and venture capitalists, and they'll give you money, and that's how you can turn something small into something really big and make your dent in the world, in the universe. And so I was hooked. After college, there immediately after, got recruited to join an accelerator program that was top ranked in the country at the time, similar to YC or Techstars, called the Brandery in Cincinnati. That was an amazing experience. Went through the program. Unfortunately, the company that I helped start didn't end up working out, but ended up joining one of our other cohort companies as the head of growth and helped them raise a seed round from TipTop Ventures, which was like a killer experience. 22, 23-year-old fresh out of school. From there, was at that company for a little less than a year and then got the itch to start something on my own again. Built a media company focused on startups and entrepreneurs outside of Silicon Valley. So we were kind of like the TechCrunch of everywhere else. We held conferences every year in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Memphis, Tennessee. Back in 2013, Forbes named us one of the top 10 must-attend conferences for founders that year, which was pretty cool. Through that for about 3 years, built an amazing community, realized it's pretty hard to monetize a media business, had a modest exit with that company. And then most recent and relevant to what I'm doing at TipTop today, joined as part of the founding team, head of marketing, eventually CMO at a vertical software company called Greenlight Guru. We're a quality and regulatory compliance platform for the medtech industry. Had an amazing ride there. We bootstrapped that business to a partial exit and transition to private equity. An amazing run, was there almost 9 years. Wore many, many hats that you can imagine, starting out as the only go-to-market person. And yeah, had great growth, great outcome there. Happy to dive more into that. And yeah, my experience in vertical software and in helping build and grow Greenlight Guru is really what brought me to the thesis that we're currently investing behind with TipTop Ventures, which is early stage, pre-seed and seed stage vertical SaaS and vertical AI companies.
So there's so much I want to unpack. I actually want to go back to, and I'm always a fan of profanities, the holy shit moment when you're at IU. Does any story, and I'd love to hear the story, if there anything that sticks out like this, can you set that up for us? Because I would love to hear your story, but then also clue in for other people who have that moment and how to listen for that moment. Should it come up and say, I want to be an investor? Does any anecdote bubble to the top of your mind?
It does, yeah. It's a pretty interesting story, and it really was like a light bulb type moment and experience for me. I was coming into my senior year, always very entrepreneurial, as I mentioned, had a business back in college. I always said, though, that I quote unquote went to college to learn how to start a real business. Well, what I learned is what I was running in high school very much was a real business. But in my senior year, what I realized, the question I was actually asking is, how do you start a high growth, venture backed, scalable startup? But those weren't concepts that were familiar to me. And how I came across that was my senior year, coming up at the end of the year, knew I was going to have to figure out what I was going to do next, get a job or start a company. And definitely wanted to go the company route. And so I had to start exploring for ideas and looking into things. And luckily, the Kelly School of Business had a really awesome business plan competition. I think it was called the Best Competition. That was sponsored by some local successful entrepreneurs and founders that had had exits in the software space. And they, Mike Troutski and Brad Whistler, back at the time, ran an accelerator program called Sproutbox in Bloomington, Indiana. And they would host a national conference where they would bring in top investors and top founders to Bloomington, Indiana for a 2-day conference called the Combine, which I believe they still run to this day. I would have to check that, at least as of a couple years ago, they were. And it's just a fantastic event with a fantastic community. And that was the first time when I attended that. I heard some successful founders and entrepreneurs on stage telling their journey about how basically they had an idea with some buddies and they built a product, and the product ended up going viral. They didn't almost know how to handle it or what to do. This was 2008-9 timeframe, early social media days. And they went and talked to investors, and they gave them a bunch of money, and they moved out to the Valley, and they hired 200 people, and the whole thing blew up like 2 or 3 years later. But I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. That's the model. That's what I've been looking for my whole life. And so after that conference, I went back to my apartment, like fully inspired, and just being the learning machine that I like to think that I am, just totally dove in and tried to learn everything I could about this world and this community. And in that process, I came across some gentlemen that, for this audience, I think will likely be familiar by the name of Brad Feld, Fred Wilson, and Mark Suster.
Yeah, I've heard of these people. Upfront is this week's.
Yeah. Finally, Upfront Summit, and I'm forgetting the name of the fund that it used to be before they rebranded to Upfront. But he had his on both sides of the blog, or both sides of the table blog, and I had this moment. I was like, oh my gosh, the whole reason that I went to college was to learn everything that these guys are just transparently sharing on their blog. And I was like, this is freaking amazing. This is how you start one of these companies. These are the venture capitalists. This is the process. And I actually ended up dropping out of school about 3 weeks later after that event with 1 semester to go, and made it my goal and my mission to start a company and eventually get into a startup accelerator in that summer cohort. Luckily, I was able to connect and get into the brandery, but basically locked myself in my basement for 6 months and didn't talk to any of my friends, didn't go out, didn't do anything, and just tried to learn everything I possibly could about the venture world, and while also incubating and working on a new startup, and ended up attending and then hosting some startup weekend events during that time and getting really plugged into the startup communities, both Bloomington and Indianapolis and Cincinnati. But yeah, that was kind of my aha light bulb moment, and just went headfirst into it. And yeah, here we are about 15 years later.
Can I ask a question? Like, because this is a big thing. Like, okay, you have this aha moment, and I think a lot of people have that. And you decided to stay in Indiana, Cincy, and stay in the central, in the as a Midwesterner. You know, shout to the Midwest, shout to Cincy Tech. Emma and Ashley Keating over there are friends as well. Why'd you do that versus head to the coast? Why didn't you move to the Bay or move to New York? What made you want to just do it where you were doing it?
Yeah, I don't know if that decision was as conscious in the moment. As I mentioned, I was kind of networking my way around the ecosystems, and uh, ended up attending some events that the Brandery had just had their first cohort, and met some folks there. And I actually went on this thing called the Startup Bus. I don't know if you remember that, or anybody remembers. This was it was kind of like a startup weekend where you build a business over a weekend, but rather than doing it in whatever city, they had like 8 or 10 buses starting at different locations all over the country. And you would basically come up with an idea and build it over the weekend, and then had a competition on our way to South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, which is where I now live. And I was my first time going to Austin. But during that adventure, one of the other folks on that bus with me was Mike Bott, who at the time was the general manager of the Brandery. I guess I left a positive impression on him. And after we ended up getting back, and I kind of told him where I was at and what my goals were and the company that I was working on at the time, and he ended up recruiting me and encouraging me to apply to the Brandery, and ultimately ended up getting into that program. And then getting connected to the community there, and ultimately found a fascinating community, realized you can build really big businesses in the Midwest as well. I will also say the pull to go to Silicon Valley or others were definitely there, but the track was working, the network was there, and yeah, it ended up working out.
No, I love that. It reminds me of another guest on the show, Kevin Moore, in Oklahoma at Vertical Ventures. The theme that he kept going back, and I don't know if you have a reaction to this. His mantra is grow where you're planted. Grow where you're planted. And especially as we're all searching for deals now. And again, me being in New York, trying to pitch like, oh, we look for deals outside the coast. I don't know. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? This idea of grow where you're planted? But you're saying it didn't sound strategic. It was like, I went on a bus, and I'm simplifying, but I went on a bus and I met some cool people, and this is just where I was going to hang my hat and start. Does any of that, I'm just curious your reactions to that thought about where you grew up in venture.
Yeah, I don't know that I have strong feelings one way or another. I think you probably should optimize for what you're looking to do. I think what I mentioned going into that, though, I had made it my goal to get into a startup accelerator.
Yeah.
So I was very conscious about the fact that the Brandery was in Cincinnati, and that Mike Bott was going to be on that bus, and that he was the GM. And so ultimately, I think that ended up working out, and it probably closed off a couple of other thoughts of applying to other accelerators that were in different areas. But I wasn't by any means opposed to moving outside of the Midwest to do that. But I found amazing people that helped advance what I was looking to do, and it just so happened to be in Cincinnati. And so it ended up working out really well. And then Greenlight Guru, the company I helped build, was based in Indianapolis, and we were all in person. And Indy has an amazing startup community as well. I think it was pretty nascent at the time, starting the business back in 2014, and really now has a even more thriving ecosystem with large exits in the ecosystem, like the Exact Target's $2.5 billion to Salesforce, which I think happened in 2012 or 2013, and was part of the catalyst or accelerator in that. And amazing organizations in the state there, like TechPoint, that have done a great job really advancing and growing the ecosystem very strategically with talent, capital, connections, and all of the above. Ultimately, did end up moving down to Austin, Texas to start the venture fund though. And so that was for a strategic reason as well. And so I resonate with it. And I think there's a ton of value in being super plugged in to whatever community that you're at. But I don't know that it should quote unquote hold you back in any way to stop you from going somewhere else if there is an opportunity that helps push forward what you're looking to do.
Yeah, let's stay with that, like advice for a second. I mean, so we talk a little about the geography aspect of it and sort of your journey. If someone's listening and on their cusp of raising their own fund or becoming a solo GP, is there a perspective and a look back of advice you would give them or wish you had at the beginning of this journey?
Yeah. It's been a journey. I think go into it eyes wide open. Building a venture fund is like doing anything else or building any other business. You have to go 0 to 1. And I think you have to be prepared all the way around to go 0 to 1. It's not easy by any means, no matter what you're doing, whether you're starting a small business, looking to raise a pre-seed round or a friends and family round for a high growth venture backed startup, or getting off the ground as a solo GP. And so getting mentally prepared for that, getting your family prepared for that, getting
Preach on the family end.
exactly. I mean, you may call it a solo GP, but as you know, it's anything but solo. Like you live and die by your network. You live and die by your family and your close supporters and people backing you. And so I think just go into it eyes wide open that you are starting a business and it is like any other business. And that's going to take a lot of hard work, grind, grit, luck, relationships, and all of the above. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Going back to those first hurdles and family or conversations, otherwise community, any conversations stick out to you that were formative in that early part of when you first decided to raise the fund?
Yeah. I mean, just massive shout out to my early believers and early LPs and my then girlfriend that was now fiance to now wife.
Hey, congrats. You closed the deal, man. Congrats.
Yeah. Biggest one of my life for sure. And yeah, and she's absolutely amazing and all the way around and unbelievably supportive. But yeah, I think back to transitioning out of Greenlight Guru and a little bit of an identity crisis at that time too. Like Greenlight Guru had been my life and really been my identity for the last 8, 9 years, 10 years at that point. And so I did have a lot of formidable discussions with people in my network, early investors in Greenlight Guru, our founding team members, our co-founders, and just chatted about, because it wasn't 100% positive that starting TipTop Ventures and going into venture was going to be the next route that I was going to take. And so in this transition period, was able and fortunate to be able to take some time off and got a cabin out in the Rocky Mountains and had a little bit and would go hiking in the mornings and jotting down ideas. And I knew that I was either going to start another vertical software company or I was going to start a venture fund. And yeah, there was a lot of conversations with folks that helped me kind of clear my head and understand pros, cons, risks, upside, personal life, professional life, like all of the above when making that decision. And yeah, I remember some pretty impactful conversations with folks that really gave me the early belief and eventually became the early LPs that gave me confidence to move forward with what I'm doing today.
That's awesome. We're going to talk into fundraising in a second, but I'd love to build on what you said about I have this very romantic picture of you in the cabin, scribbling down, talking about the future of vertical software. I'm curious if I can ask a two-parter. The first is, what are some of the parts about vertical software that you believe? And maybe going back to the scribbles in that notebook, I don't think you had really a notebook, but that's what I think in my mind.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm curious what's in that notebook and how that thesis about vertical software and vertical SaaS has evolved. And then secondly, okay, based on what you think about that, ISOs to do an investor versus a company. Is that clear? Like, I would just love to for our listeners to know what you think about vertical and then how the conclusion of that data was I should invest versus operate?
Yeah. So I did. I wrote down a bunch of ideas. It was an Evernote notebook, but
Okay.
nonetheless,
That's pretty good. I mean, I was looking this like old raggedy moleskin, like with a quilt.
well,
Okay, fine. It was never Evernote. That's cool. Good enough. But keep going. So what was in it, or as much as you could?
scribbled notes on napkins
I love it.
around here. But no, I wrote the original thesis, vision, all of the above, except for the name of what I'm doing here at TipTop. I like to say, or did say, like, TipTop was born in the Rocky Mountains, more or less. But I explored a bunch of different ideas, and our founder CEO at Greenlight Guru, David Duran, in the early days used to say, like, outside of your family, like, the people at work are who you spend the most time with. And so, yeah, you should, if you're in the fortunate enough position to work with people that you enjoy being around, you should do such. And so when I was kind of exploring this, the other thought that I had, outside your family and your coworkers, the third bucket of people that you, at least in my experience, that you end up spending the most time with are your customers. And so I really optimized around whatever I was looking to do next. Who are going to be my customers? Who was I going to be serving for a minimum of the next 8, 10, 12 years? When exploring actual startup ideas, I realized there wasn't a single idea that I was super passionate about that I felt like needed to exist in the world, and that be able to run through every wall in the world to make this vision a reality in the world. And without that sort of dogged drive and kind of belief in whatever you're doing, I don't think anything's going to be successful. And so just coming up with a startup idea to do a startup for its sake in its own didn't really excite me. And there wasn't one single thing that I was super passionate about. But I also did this exercise, the Japanese term, ikigaya, which is kind of about how to find what you should do in the world. And it's kind of this 4-part Venn diagram of what you're good at.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah, how you make money. Now I'm going to forget.
The one like your purpose in the world,
Yeah,
or
your
what you?
purpose and how you can have an impact on the
Yes.
world. And so the middle of that felt like I like to say I'm the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. Like, come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, I've just always grown up thinking about business ideas, tinkering with things, working on business ideas. I had this realization, like, what better customer in the entire world to serve would be like the most extraordinary founders in the world trying to build the biggest, best businesses that are going to impact the way that we live, work, all of the above. And so that really got me excited. And then the second part of that, back to Vertical SaaS.
Yeah, I wanted to get there. Thanks.
When I kind of took a look around and was able to pick my head up and see the forest through the trees a little bit, I realized just how big of an opportunity vertical software is. And it wasn't just something that we were doing at Greenlight Guru, but this was a model that was truly reinventing basically all industries. And the value prop to the end user is just so strong that if you can have this all-in-one, easy to use, modern solution that you can get ready specifically for you out of the box, like, that's going to play in all industries. And this time frame, real quick, I'll put
No, I keep going.
in this time frame. This was Q4 2022 when I was doing this, and so if you guys remember, at that time, ChatGPT was released in November of that year as well. And part of the original thesis for the fund was there were these companies like Toast and Procore and Service.
Can I do one thing real quick, just for people who may not be up on the term of vertical SaaS? Maybe do just a quick primer on what vertical SaaS is versus traditional horizontal SaaS, and then we can kind of go back, because I know we're going to go into the Toast aspect, but not everyone may know. There may be some people who aren't as familiar with that. If you could educate all of us, I think we'd be in great debt to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for jumping in on that. And yeah, happy to set the context. So when I say vertical SaaS, I mean software that's built specifically for an industry. And so like Toast in restaurants, or Procore in construction, or Viva in pharma. And so versus horizontal SaaS, which are build one product and sell it to multiple industries. So I think like the quintessential example is Salesforce, CRM in multiple industries versus Viva, which is CRM just specifically for pharma. And so that's the
No, I appreciate it because I had when I was pitching this, I had a lot of new angels who were interested in watching this. So I love. Thank you for spending 30 seconds and catching everyone up.
yeah,
Please continue. I'm sorry.
for sure. No, not at all. And so when I kind of picked my head up and saw the forest through the trees a little bit, I realized just how big of a trend and opportunity this is. And these companies like Toast and Shopify and Service Titan and others, what they had figured out is that not only could you sell the software to the same industry, and so come in, build a solution, expand into a platform, and then the model is then be able to own the relationship with your customer, build trust, and sell them more and more products. But they had realized that you could also continue to monetize through a fintech opportunity. And so like Toast at the POS, you look at any of their earnings calls, something like 92% of their revenue or something is coming from their financial products. Service Titan just went public back in December of last year. I think they were right around 50% of their revenue these days are coming from their financial products. And so I saw that that was a huge opportunity across all industries. And I realized that my experience at Greenlight Guru gave me a right to win with the top founders in the world, because in our experience, the conventional wisdom in VC land at the time was that vertical SaaS TAMs were too small to support venture-backed outcomes, but all those companies that I just mentioned had proven that not to be the fact. And so it was becoming a little more popular of a thesis around vertical software. And I realized that my experience, gave me the right to win with a lot of these top founders. And so that was the original thesis. Then I mentioned ChatGPT being released. The other thing that became pretty clear and pretty obvious pretty early was that vertical software companies were going to be some of the best in the world positioned to take advantage of the advancement with LLMs, with basically data being the new gold or the new oil, if you will. And these guys were just sitting on big chunks of very specific industry specific data around outcomes. And the new companies that would come up would be able to leverage that as well. And so the thesis then has transitioned to include what now is really a lot more popular these days as well, called vertical AI. But I really see it as a transition of the vertical software market. And so I kind of call vertical software 1.0 was workflows only. That's your Vivas, your Autodesks of the world. Vertical software 2.0 is Service Titan and Procore and Mindbody and Toast. And then vertical software 3.0 now has a couple different unique flavors, and we're still very, very, very early innings of this opportunity. But now you can leverage AI to create these magical experiences that just weren't possible before.
Right.
So now all these opportunities, all these industries that maybe didn't adopt software in either 1.0 or 2.0 are now able to adopt and get up to speed. And so the size of the opportunity has essentially like 5 to 10x again.
That AI has accelerated and obviated that sort of original TAM argument.
Correct.
Well, let me pivot because I when we started this show, I didn't want to go deep into. I wanted to focus on the narrative, but it's hard to separate the thesis from the story on it. Again, this is why you're one of the first ports of call for me when I'm looking at a vertical SaaS deal. I'm always interested, like, what does Nick think about this? And I'm always thankful to share things with you. The other part I'd love to, if it's okay, I'd love to tuck into is how you do it all, right? So I'm going to start with kind of a joke from a solo GP perspective. On a scale of 1 to 10, how close have you ever been to actually getting hit by a bus?
Very, very low.
Good. So bringing it back out of that, how do you do it all? Like, how do you organize your time and wear all the hats, from HR, marketing, deal flow, ops, LP relationships? Like, how do you have a system or a hack or some tips of how you try and keep your time and life organized?
I don't know that there's any hack or tip or trick outside of just deliberate focus and hard work and build process. I think a lot of my experience from Greenlight Guru and operating translates over to building it. And that's maybe to my advice of starting again is understand you're building a business. You're not just investing in companies. You have a full back office. You are a fiduciary to LPs, and it is your responsibility to communicate to them. And so I would say my tip or trick is like understand and be deliberate and know that you are responsible for all of those things. And so how do you get it done? I would say even as a solo GP, like you got to build a team. You can't do it all alone. And so one of the things that I realized when I was first kind of deciding to move forward with this full time and getting to full conviction and knew that this is what I want to do with my career over the next 20, 30, 40 years. I started saying though, like, if a win happens in the forest and nobody's there to celebrate it with you, is it even a win? Like I started joke, like my wife can only be so happy for me when LP or we sign a new deal or markup or whatever it is. And so I also said I was more a solo GP by force than by choice. I just didn't have that person in my network that I'd worked with for the last 5 to 10 years that also was trying to do this for the next 20 to 30 years. However, my anchor LP and who was our largest outside investor at Greenlight Guru and a board member for 7.5 years. And one of those individuals that I mentioned, I had some of these early conversations with, Bill Loss, who's a multiple repeat founder with multiple exits and just an amazing human being, kind of leaned in a little bit and without bringing it up, kind of brought me to asking him, hey man, would you want to be a little bit more involved here? Not like, let's go be GPs together. He's like, I'm at a different stage of my life and career and have no desire to want to be a GP, but I believe and trust and love what you're doing and would love to be more involved. And so could I potentially, or I asked him, would you be open to potentially leaning in, and actually had this discussion with him out at Vail on my honeymoon, one of the few calls that I ended up taking on my honeymoon, asking him if he wanted to get more involved and join as a founding advisor. And so he's been a tremendous help, both from a diligence, portfolio support, sourcing, like all around, and just a thought partner. I think no matter who you are, like having someone to challenge your thinking and playing red team and playing devil's advocate is great for all of us. And then he's been massively supportive and helpful in being able to connect with other LPs and opening up his network to the fund, having our aligned interests. And so, I would say you don't have to do it all alone. And then back to the RevOps comment, like, find the best fund admins in the world, like know who you're going to work with, outsource as much. Like recently got a virtual executive assistant and she's amazing. And that's been able to free up a lot of time. I have a fractional CFO who was one of the internal co-founders at Carta, their fund admin practice, and has massive experience working with hundreds of the top venture funds. And he's been an awesome resource and collaborator. And we have a weekly connect. And back in Q3 of last year, I started running a venture fellows program as well. And so brought 2 fellows into the fund to be able to help out with things, and brought that back again and have 2 other fellows, brought one continued and one new fellow from that last cohort starting here in the second semester, if you will. And so while yes, technically I am a solo GP, I believe I have a strong and mighty team around me today.
Yeah. Can you say more about the sort of the structure? I mean, so you have Bill, you have 2 venture partners, and how I mean, as much as you can share about how you organize all this. Like for instance, at Side, like we have daily stand-ups between Chad and I. We have a weekly meeting where we look at, just like like a larger firm, we'll go through fundraising pipeline and IC, and we put those structures in place. We're trying to get to what we call one meeting Mondays, where only on Mondays, the only meeting we have is our weekly meeting, and we have the rest of the time to work together. I would say we're like 60-70% effective at actually doing that. So those, I mean, those are some of the structures where I'm using, and I give myself like a C- in trying to manage all that. Do you have, broad things of how you structure all those moving parts and your team around you as a solo GP?
Yeah, for sure. And I've tested out a lot of things, and it's an iterative process like anything else, and constantly evolving and growing. But one thing that has been constant since we did a first close on the fund was that Bill and thank you. In a great spot there. We implemented what is essentially, like you said, an IC meeting, just like a larger fund. So Bill and I have been meeting on a weekly basis for an hour every week for the last almost year now. And we run what is essentially like an IC meeting, and he plays devil's advocate and red team and challenges the thinking. I bring new opportunities and we hash it out. So that's been recurring. Same with our CFO that I mentioned, and big shout out to Andrew Brown and Nakama Solutions and what they're doing. But we have a weekly connect every Wednesday morning as well to go over the back office and the finances and the strategy and where things are at. And they've been a massive help. And he's now built a team around it that I work with as well that are just absolutely fantastic. And then Bill and I also have a second weekly meeting where we're looking at more on the LP side of things and chatting through the LP pipeline and LP communications and everything that is related to the other side of the business, if you will. And then, I've tried doing no meeting Mondays as well. I've tried doing no meeting Fridays.
Tried one, just one.
It's hard to keep it, as you know, like in this business, like time is our most scarce resource for sure. And you got to be deliberate in planning those buckets and blocking off time for the heads down work to make sure that you're able to get it done. And like you, I maybe would give myself a C- or somewhere on there that it's always evolving, always getting better, but never where I want it to be, if you will. And so I've tried different things. That is like doing all founder meetings on Wednesdays and all LP meetings on Tuesday or like whatever it is. Right now, I have a pretty good structure I feel in place. Try to keep Mondays light like you. That's the heads down day for the most part. And then, we do that IC meetings on Tuesday mornings, CFOs Wednesdays, LPs are Thursdays, and like really digging in and diligence is our Fridays. And so, but it's flexible and it's hard to bend the world to your calendar, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I struggle with, I'm curious, like the other ones I think I can handle, my portcos, is that the LP one is hard. It's hard to have like an LP day. LP wants to meet. I'm like, okay, with me. Like, is that one real? I mean, is that the hardest one to do? At least when you hear that structure, it is for me, at least top of the mind.
Yeah, I would say I've abandoned trying to do that structure. So that
Okay.
it did not work. It was not conducive to how I operate and how I'm running the fund. And so, today the meetings are sporadic. Like, I think it's part of our job to be great at context switching. We switch from one industry, one founder, one portco, one LP, like family office versus a high net worth versus a fund of funds versus a pre-seed deal versus a seed deal. Like, we're constantly content switching, and I think that's where the training as an operator, it's not much different. Growing Greenlight Guru, it was very similar. You got to be good at context switching. You go from one-on-ones to customer calls to prospect calls to talking to new vendors, running a procurement process. You may have an upset customer, and it may be a challenging or difficult call. You may have a difficult call with an employee or a team member, and a lot of that is built up that muscle. And like strength training or anything else, like you build and you reset your base and you build again and you reset your base and you constantly take on more and you look to find more ways to get more leverage. And it's always evolving. And just as long as you're making progress and getting 1% better every day is the goal, and just keep moving forward.
You know, I'd love to take the opposite view of this, because things are, I mean, first of all,
Please.
we skipped over something really big, like close, right? Huge deal. Congrats. And so those are, and having done one, it's a huge high. It sometimes doesn't feel high enough because you know how much more you have to go, but it's congrats on this. The spirit of this podcast, I want to keep it real. Like in the journey of TipTop, would you be willing to share like a low, like where you were just like, what did I do? I'm an imposter. Like, is there a story? Because I want to get to those moments. You know, I do this at home. I put my head on the dinner table and I was like, I don't know what to do. My wife's like, honey, you chose this. And I'm like, thank you. But like, there are certain things that I try to do and get myself out of it, ranging from exercise or talking. I mean, like we have a conversation and just bitch and moan.
Yeah.
I mean, can you describe a low point in that journey? And then what did you do to get yourself out? Because there may be some listeners out there that are in that spot or near that spot.
Yeah. I'll share. I think last summer going into fall was a difficult time. We had done a first close. I warehoused 3 deals into the fund. We had done at the time maybe one or two additional opportunities. You're building a lot of processes for the first time. You're building LP communications for the first time. You're building your startup pipeline for the first time. I was building the LP pipeline for the first time. Like, it was a lot of firsts, and it could feel overwhelming. Like, at the end of the day, you got to have capital to be able to deploy. That's what we're in the business
Hmm.
on, filling that top of the funnel and meeting with new LPs. And unless you are deliberate about that, like, it can dry up. And I think my focus really went to our portcos and the startup pipeline. And there's a bit of a lull from them, the LP perspective, and went a while in between closes and getting new commitments. And that was difficult to juggle and balance it all. And similar to you, at Greenlight Guru, I picked up running to be able to clear my head and keep my head straight, and maybe had fallen a little bit outside of that routine, and have gotten more back into at least trying to be more consistent with my running and being able to clear my head, and also talking to my wife and having similar conversations. And whether she says it or I say it, like, look, I know I chose this, and we're doing this for a reason. And so there's no complaining about it. It just is what it is. And so kind of got to pick yourself up by the bootstraps, if you will, and figure out what changes you need to make to get to the optimal outcome that you're looking for. But yeah, without those hits of new LPs and new commitments coming in, it can get challenging at times. And yeah, that was tough. I had to really, that was around the time looking at my schedule, looking at how I'm managing my time, looking at how I'm prioritizing things, and looking at my own health as well, and really trying to get all of those things in order. And so, yeah, that was a challenging time. And I feel like I'm better having gone through it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my health is suffering. I feel a little bit better, and I actually feel like I have time to go run after first close and doing things. You don't have to go there, but I mean, it's just sharing it between friends. Like the other part I've actually done, because my wife can't be my therapist. I'm in therapy. I'm in full on therapy, and it's been great to get the mental part of my stuff cleared out. So that's just been something that I've actually put it back into my practice, and it is running for the mind and the soul that I have not made time for until recently. I don't know if
Cheers.
that.
Yeah, cheers to that. I've had kids for over a decade now, and they
Oh
both
shit.
worked with me through my time at Greenlight Guru, and continued when I was taking a year or so to figure out what I was going to do next before going full time and into this, and what I'm doing with TipTop. And they've both been amazing resources. One is more of an executive coach, and one's more of a mental performance coach. Wouldn't definitely I think he wouldn't be excited to, not a counselor or a psychologist, I would say, but a mental performance coach of how to get you to perform at your best. Kevin Bailey at Green Fuel, and he's an amazing resource, works with top founders and venture capitalists on this exact thing of helping you bring your vision into reality, and the tools that you need to keep your head straight and to take on these big challenges and to climb the mountain, if you will. And so he's been amazing. And then my executive coach as well, Sandra Forrester's been with me for over 10 years now, and seen me from the start of Greenlight Guru to where we are today. And so having those constants really balances my life out and helps keep things straight.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That was totally unscripted, from that. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's an important thing to normalize and talk about the head game of this, because it's just us out here, man, and it's hard. So I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability on that. Maybe let's okay, so let's pick up, because we're nearing time here. You and I could probably go on for. Let's look ahead. Like what's next for TipTop in the next year or two. I would say both personally and professionally from that last conversation. Where does Nick Tippmann and TipTop go from here?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be pushing towards our final close later in the year, and getting to our full target of 15 million. About half of the way there today, and so super pumped about that. continue investing in the top vertical software and vertical AI founders and doing new great opportunities and supporting our portfolio companies and just really focused on building this business and building TipTop's brand and getting out there and meeting founders and working with our LPs. And yeah, really doubling down and it's real. We're here, we're in business, it's happening, things are going well. We just got our first markup in the fund last month. It's fantastic.
Let's go.
This at a fantastic just under a 1.6 multiple on invested capital to date. We're at positive TVPI already, out of the J curve, if you will. And so yeah, just doubling down and focus on what's working and continuing moving forward. It's going to be a fun year too.
Awesome. Any thoughts on the personal front in terms of what's next for Nick?
Yeah, on the personal front, well, it's been an amazing first year of marriage, and both myself and my wife, Mari, are grinders, I will say. And so making sure we're able to find time for ourselves and do those dinners once a week and be able to have time for each other. And so, yeah, on the personal front and making sure the head game's strong as well.
That's awesome. Nick, man, you know how much I respect you. Thank you for sharing your journey. I know you're in a lot of places. If people want to reach out to you, founders, other GPs, or most importantly, LPs, I mean, not most importantly, but most scarcely LPs, where can they find you and how would they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I would say connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a note, shoot me a DM. You can check out our site, tiptop.vc. You can check us out. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, at N Tippmann. And I would say reach out via email as well, nick@tiptop.vc. Would love to chat. Yeah, I'm around.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for making the time. Listeners, thank you for hanging around. And thank you for joining us in another episode of Alone Together, the podcast about solo GPs and the little crazy part of the venture ecosystem we inhabit. I'm Mike Ma, your host and GP at Sidecut Ventures. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next episode.
Thank you so much, Mike. This has been a real pleasure, and hopefully your audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you for the time.